All right, we are live. Today I'm going to be doing my first video interview, the podcast or video cast of Dmitry Tumanov and Treasure Reef, an aquatic log. And today I'm beyond happy to have my good friend and an old acquaintance, Jay Esperandio from EcoTech, somebody that I've interacted with both professionally and in the reefing friendship for years, source of many ideas. Lots of them are great in engineering, in lighting, in power heads, and just overall gives me a good insight into the reefing hobby, into the EcoTech and aqua illumination brand. So thank you, Jay, for joining.
Thank you, Dimitri. That was a splendid introduction.
Thanks.
Far too kind. Far too kind.
I meant every single word, and I'm not sure if the listeners know.
It's not true. Not true.
In addition, for Jay being the spokesperson for EcoTech, he's also got a really nice reef in his office, and not the one that you can see right now in his background, because this one is a virtual. I'm not even sure where you get your screenshot like this from.
This was my old tank, actually. This was the tank that I had before. This was the SR80. Now I have a Waterbox 130. Right. And to say it's my tank now is a little bit of a stretch. The tank now is more of Kelsey's tank, so she takes good care of it for us.
What equipment does it currently have on?
What's on there now? There is two XR30 G5s are what's lighting it. And then I think there's a couple of MP40s, a couple of Nero power heads, and then obviously I have a couple, I think there's a Quantum 180 on there,
it's a nice
piracy roller, media reactor, some Versa dosing pumps, and yeah, I think that's it. Oh, there's obviously a Vectra, two Vectras. One feeds the Clarity, one is the return, and then a heater and a bunch of other this and that's as well.
I assume it has the auto top off as well, some sort on this.
Yeah, it does. I think I'm using right now. I'm using the EcoTech Marine's vacuum float switches with a Versa pump. Is what I have running for auto top off.
That's so sorry. You're using Versa for auto top off, like to actually pour the water in?
Yep. It's just set up in continuous mode, plugged into the float switch.
And what do you do for a speed for something like this? I mean, have you programmed your Versa in a specific manner to do the water top off, or?
Yeah, I think it's set at about 30 ml a minute. I'm not sure exactly. It's basically at whatever the maximum speed before you start to get before you can actually start to hear the pump. So it's sort of in that Versa is pretty much quiet up till a certain level, and then obviously you start to hear noise because once you run it at higher and higher levels. So to keep it quiet, I think it's around 30 ml a minute. So it just runs at that until the ATO switch kicks it off. So
that's that is neat. And how's the tank looking right now? Like how's it doing?
It's doing really well, actually. In terms of particularly the acropores are growing like crazy, but you know, as with the hobby, there's always something, right? And at the moment, I've kind of got a situation going on where it seems to be a bacterial infection, and so the corals will be doing great, and then for some reason I'll just start to get a bit of RTNing, you know, in one spot, and it'll go on for a while on that coral, and then it'll stop, and that coral will kind of heal. Meanwhile, another coral, completely different, will start to have the same thing happen. I haven't seen any specific pests in there, so I'm assuming it's bacterial. And Mike Paletta was just over visiting, and he was saying that he had that happen in his tank. And He's an OG in the hobby, so I usually like to hear what he has to say. And he's prescribed a witch hazel treatment, which I guess kills bad bacteria, and you resupplement with good bacteria. And he said that when he had it, that's what he did over the course of a week, and that kind of cleared it up. So I'm going to give it a shot, without any more research or scientific investigation than that. I'm going to take experience at its value, which is usually quite high, and see if that helps me out there. So, other than that, though, yeah, I mean the tank's doing great. Coral's growing really fast. Tank will have to be moved in the not too distant future, so that'll be an interesting experience when that happens. But yeah, no, good stuff.
And you guys are moving, why and where, like when? Give me a little bit of context on that, please.
Yeah, so I mean, there'll be a lot more information about that when we actually do move, when we're in the new building. But in our area, there's various initiatives of economic development, and one of the things that we've run into with our current building is that it is not really set up that well for what we do in terms of manufacturing and inventory storage and all that kind of thing. So with our current building, which we've been in for, I think it's almost 10 years now, which is where the bulk of the products which are currently on the market were all developed and manufactured. We're going to actually move across town to a new location, which is more suitable specifically for manufacturing, which is obviously what we do. So when that happens, we will have to move the remaining tanks in the office over there, as well as the rest of the operation. So it's very exciting. Very weird time to be doing it with COVID and everything else kind of, and some of us like myself right now actually working from home. So interesting times, interesting experience, but soon to be a new building, new location.
Good luck with that. I know you have a few tanks with coral in it, and moving anything with coral is presents its own challenges. So I used to have done it a couple of times successfully, but most of the time it results in abysmal failure. So word of advice is see if you can offload the colonies into somewhere established and like break it up into pieces, and don't combine it with a move, because nothing is going to go the way you think it will.
Yeah, I mean, we've had the experience ourselves before. It was a total disaster. Even within the context of the office, we've had, as hobbyists, we've had every, type of issue. We've had seams go on tanks. We've had plumbing fail, and had to quickly replace a tank with another tank. And even interestingly enough, we had that happen with one tank, and we basically we took half of the water from the original tank, all of the sand, we rinsed it in salt water, obviously, to get rid of the detritus. Same rock work, everything exactly the same equipment, same filtration, same protein skimmer, same everything. And yeah, the coral was not happy. We lost a lot, as you always, when you have some kind of issue with a tank, right? It's always a risk, but it is impressive to see just like even whatever was slightly different, parameter wise, as a result of that new glass, that new surface area, maybe the amount of detritus in the sand bed, who knows? But whatever that difference was certainly detrimental to the coral for sure. So.
Well, that goes to show you how little we really understand when it comes to bacteria. You've touched upon it earlier, and you mentioned Michael Paletta, but I remember that when we were visiting Sanjay, he was referring later on that he had a special separate tank. I think it was like 80 gallon or so, that he started from scratch, I think with ceramic rock and no live bacteria and whatnot. And with his experience I've seen the corals in his 500-gallon tank, like colors were through the roof, just amazing. And the guy who knows his stuff could not keep anything like on a high level in the tank 1 year after the mark. So I guess I'm going through exactly the same process right now downstairs, where I have two tanks, one AI, one EcoTech. where basically I've seeded some with existing live rock, some not, and I'm still having diatom all through this thing. And you hear from many hobbyists where there's just something mysterious about the first 3-4 months where you don't want to put any SPS in there. If you put an anemone, there's a good chance it may not like being there. But then something happens, and then like 1 year later, like you said, surface area, but also the balance and everything else is in equilibrium, and then you can actually keep the coral. And where I find the biggest issue is that a lot of hobbyists who are new to the hobby, they go in and they enter into setting up a reef, and then they get the best equipment and then best, salt, etc., etc. They set everything up, they're doing everything by the book, and then they start getting these failures, and the first thing that they would do is blame either the salt or lighting or something else. And a lot of times it's really not the case. So I'm sure how often do you come across something like this, and what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's exactly like you said. There's so many variables. I mean, you have to imagine you are recreating an entire biotope, and probably the most biologically diverse per cubic centimeter on the planet, and you're trying to do it in your home in a box, right? And then on top of it, you add in the fact that if you go to the reef and you go diving, you'll see that in any given area, the number of coral species, in particular, when we're talking about a reef tank, aren't that many. Coral on the reef typically congregates in the area that it suits its best, and then one species is generally the prevalent species in that area. But then when we go to our home reef tank, we're trying to, I think my last tank, this tank might be on the same order of magnitude, but probably I counted over 100, maybe different corals. Now, obviously, on a reef, you have all sorts of different organisms as well that you may not have. But just in terms of the coral species, which are obviously your main focus in the reef tank, I mean, it's you're taking them from all over the world, all different depths of the reef, all different flow and light and turbidity conditions, nutrient levels, and you're putting them all together in the tank. And then, and then we're surprised when one or several things is not doing that great. So yeah, it's not an easy hobby. I think everyone who's in this hobby, it's a bit like golf, right? You have a lot of bad shots and you have a good shot, and the good shot's what keeps you coming back for more. And I think that's the same a bit with reef keeping, is you have that success, you see it's possible, you work to achieve it. Having good equipment, there's my company plug, helps. Having good quality additives, good quality food, particularly good quality livestock, quarantining, dipping, all of those things help you massively over the long run. But yeah, I mean, there's always something. It's like I said, the tank right now, I have this weird issue. I can't see or am aware of any actual visible type pests. Yet I have this problem going on, and immediately from experience, the first thing to check is your water parameters, right? So check all the core water parameters, check them again over a couple of weeks. Everything's totally fine. Alkalinity, magnesium, calcium, all within ranges, but more importantly, they're all stable. And then, we sent off the ICP testing to verify that there's not something weird going on, some heavy metals or something. Nope, everything 100% exactly within spec. And yet I've got this going on. Coral, there's something there. There's something problematic. And so, Mike, Witch Hazel, let's do this, buddy.
That's very true. And I think you've mentioned, so now like with ICP, there's certain things available to the hobbyists that 5 years ago would not even be imaginable, right? On one hand, probably 10-15 years ago, it was very common to get live rock right from the ocean. You could get it with all the goodies and everything else, and now that part is changing in the industry. But on the other hand, We have much better understanding of a lot of husbandry. I mean, both coral and fish. People can now, breed fish that were unheard of before. And same goes for water analysis and then equipment. So from the point of view of ecotech and aqua elimination and like how you see the hobby, what I'm curious to ask is, how do you think the hobby has changed from, let's say, 5, 10 years ago to where it is now? And then there'll be the second question would be, where do you think this is going to be another 5 years from now? But can you please elaborate on that?
Well, there's a lot of different angles to that question, but yeah, absolutely. I think one of the best things is like with many hobbies, and maybe this will continue to improve over time, as it probably will. But I think largely thanks to the internet, communities of hobbyists, and particularly reef keeping, have had a lot more access to information and to each other than there was 10 years ago. And as a result of that, especially with things like YouTube channels and reef forums, and then also all the information that's put out by retailers, manufacturers, all helps increase the general understanding level. And it demystifies a lot of the complexities related to the hobby. You take that and you couple it with just how much equipment has improved in that same period of time, and that's across all categories. I mean, I remember when I started with EcoTech, right when we were doing, launching, or right after I think EcoTech had launched the first version of the MP40, the equipment that was available on the market was not a whole lot better than what was available for freshwater. And a lot of the things, truthfully, were kind of taken and used for aquariums that weren't necessarily, nothing was really purpose built. Like even, for instance, the lighting, that was kind of towards the end of when the halides and T5 bulbs were kind of getting dialed into the level where you could actually get good results.
Yes.
Growing coral. But 5 years before that, people were still experimenting. And Mike, I keep using his name. He'll be the theme of this conversation. He was there for the beginning while they were experimenting with different bulbs and, to try and hone in on a spectrum, and be successful with lighting. So I think the massive rise in availability of information, and then the technological improvement of all the equipment, and then the third part, which people don't really think about, but again, the quality of livestock, the amount of maricultured and aquacultured stuff, as well as the husbandry techniques in terms of the import, and the fact that a lot of this coral that you get is now grown or fragged from systems, makes it a lot more tank hardy. And all of those things just in aggregate contribute to much higher level of success in the hobby. And I think if you look at just the sheer number of amazing looking tanks that people have, that the hobbyist community has to showcase our hobby now versus what it looked like 10 years ago, I think all of that kind of comes from those three things.
I think the livestock is a easy one to miss, but I think you're right on the money on this one, because I remember 10 years ago going into the store, so many mariculture colonies of acros from everywhere, and you see all those crazy, well, from Indonesia, and you see all these crazy colors. You're thinking, oh, this is the best coral I've ever seen. You bring it home and you're doomed to failure, just for failure, not because you're doing something wrong, but just because certain colonies cannot, at least at our level right now, maintain the same vibrant color as compared to, let's say, a few pieces that have made it and proven the good lighting, and then they have a name to it, like the Walt Disneys of the world, that basically have that something that can handle the home husbandry and the equipment with LEDs and all of the other stuff. So that's also an important thing, like being able to get there in the first place. So and also interesting. So I remember when I got into the hobby, this was a big shift from T5s and metal halides, where LEDs. I remember playing around with the first couple of versions of Radion. Forums were peppered with all these stories of, LEDs are not there. They're not going to be able to, allow you to have acro colors and this and that. And then just several years later, you look at any aqua farm, either worldwide corals or any one of the other ones in North America. Almost everything is now lit by radions, which are now apparently the golden standard for finding the good coloration and not spending too much money on electricity when you are trying to grow coral. So I really want, like, I'm fascinated with lighting, and my history with EcoTech and lighting goes way back. So how would you describe the current state of the lighting as it's seen by EcoTech and Aqua Illumination, and what do you think the current challenges are?
It's a good question. I mean, I can kind of talk about our company and our company strategy and a little bit of that history.
Please.
Uh,
Whatever you can disclose, so because this is going to be aired, so no trade secrets that are too close to the heart.
no, it's actually much simpler than that. I mean, I've relayed this history from my perspective, from our company's perspective, and the probably the hobbyist perspective to a certain degree. Since we got into this, and what you're saying is absolutely true. For instance, when we launched the Radion, the first generation Radion fixture, which was after Aqua Illumination, which was a different company at that time, had gotten their Sol to market. Probably the Sol was really the first commercially produced LED fixture that actually had the efficacy in that it produced enough PAR to grow hard coral. As a standalone light fixture. Now, obviously, in terms of in its lighting area, right? And then, so in terms of getting into it, that was when, it was something we thought about pursuing as a company. And then with the EcoTech Radion, it was the same deal. It was like, okay, the LED technology has progressed to the point where we can now produce an aquarium light that will actually grow coral. And credit where credit's due. The Sol was amazingly successful. The Radion was amazingly successful. It was the right time, because that was when people were looking for something new. They wanted something different. LEDs were new and exciting, and the benefits to having a fixture that's controllable as well as produces a lot less heat, and is a lot smaller and doesn't require bulbs being changed was something that really appealed to people. So from there, obviously, the trend into LEDs being the primary, now they're pretty much the vast majority of all aquarium lighting is LED. That's progressed. So, with the Gen 1 Radion, that was, what was available technologically at the time was what was in that fixture. And, LED technology progressed quickly. Lens technology, in terms of ideas about how to improve the lens efficacy and improvements, came along, and then that led into, there was that period where it was like, you want more power, more PAR, and then by around the second, third generation, it was apparent that there was more than enough power. The LEDs themselves, the diodes, were so efficient at that point that they're efficient enough to be producing more than enough output. The optics were channeling that in really well. And then now it was, well, we don't want to run the fixtures at full bore because it's not good for the coral. So how do we provide more value? More value comes in the form of spreading that light out further. And then focusing on some of the more aesthetic things related to lighting. So that's your, color rendition, reducing color separation, which is what you get because you have different diodes, and making the PAR more even so you don't have hot spots. And so the G4 started down that road, and then with the G5, it's kind of the culmination, or the latest culmination, I should say, of all of that thinking. And I think you can see, for instance, with that fixture in particular, the amount of spread you get out of you get almost 3 feet of extremely even spread at 9 inches over the water, out of a 30 centimeter long, or 12 inches if we're going to go with the imperial measurement, fixture. So, that's been kind of that kind of evolution. I think going forward, I think going forward, there's obviously room for improvement. There always is. But I think that for the time being is kind of the track is again, more efficiency, more spread, more color pop in terms of exciting pigmentation, fluorescence, all of that. Looking for ways to do that. And then from our company perspective, which is where Mobius comes in, like this massive undertaking of a whole new control platform, is not just centered on lighting, but it's bringing everything we know from all of the different areas of our product development together so that we can have this this controller platform, in the making, that will incorporate all of that and facilitate some even more advanced concepts with respect to coral and coral livestock, and make them available to the hobbyist community. So.
That certainly sounds exciting. I think right in the beginning, like when you said that first there was the PAR challenge, and then once that was met, it was the spectrum and disco effects, all of that in the industry as a whole. But one of the, I think, biggest issues at that time for LEDs was its biggest benefit was its biggest issue, which is customizability. So basically being able to tinker with the light and change the brightness as well as the color spectrum on the fly. And while this was touted as a great new feature by the LEDs, a lot of times it caused more problems for the hobbyists, because we all know that you don't get this with the T5 or metal halide, so it's set and forget. But I've experienced this many times firsthand, where if you change anything about your spectrum or schedule, so either the duration or the brightness or the spectrum, almost guaranteed the next day the alkalinity consumption by your aquarium will change. So if you will add more light, corals will consume more alkalinity. And if you don't know to check and then make adjustments to your alkalinity, you're doomed to have an issue in your tank, because if alkalinity either is going to go way up or it's going to go way down. In either case, there will be a problem, and then you get into the vicious cycle. I think right now it's happening less and less because people know about it. I'm not sure about the new aquarists, but at least experienced reefers don't run into this as often. But back 6 or 7 years ago, that was left, right, and center, where people were changing the spectrum, and it would just carry on with more issues. So you've mentioned Mobius. What do you think is the future of the color spectrum and the schedule customization? So can you maybe elaborate a little bit on that front?
Yeah, so you and I have had conversations about this, and you and I have slightly different opinions on this subject, but I think almost there's a better way to talk about this from our perspective, which is almost anecdotally. And so what I'll talk about real quick then is, for instance, the AB plus spectrum and the Radion Blue, which uses the AB plus spectrum as the cornerstone of its 100% output level. And both of those are tied to what you're talking about exactly, which is that having all of the ability to change spectrum in the world is great, but in terms of achieving success from a lighting perspective with your coral, it's almost simpler and more complicated at the same time than that. And what I'll say about simplicity is the one that you just touched on, is that coral is a organism that can adapt to a lot of different conditions. The more tank hardy a species of coral is, the more types of conditions that it can adapt to quickly. And that goes for lighting as well as all of the other parameters. So there's certain corals which we know in the hobby, you can pretty much put in any situation and they will grow and they will do well. And if your tank's really well, they'll overtake your whole tank, and then you'll regret ever having put them in there to begin with. And then there's other corals, which if you don't get those parameters, lighting, everything exactly like what it's used to from wherever you got it from, it is going to say, nope, I'm out of here. And in light of that, one of the biggest issues with having customizable LEDs is that you can change those channels, and you can change the intensity, and you can change the photo period, and all those things work together, and all of those things will have an impact on the coral. So when we kind of progressed through our experience with lighting, one of the things that became apparent was that people wanted to know what's the best, because that's the human nature, right?
Yes.
What's the best? Well, the answer to what's the best depends on the coral, your tank parameters, the light intensity, your photo period, the species of coral. I mean, the list goes on and on. There is no best. But one of the things that is true is that blue light is generally more forgiving to corals in terms of their ability to adapt to that, to being able to use that light source. So that's how we ended up with the Coral Lab. Reef Wholesale, actually in Toronto, had spent a year tuning in their coral troughs to replicate their commercial experience bests, which were with halides and T5s, and their absolute best that worked for the most things, most of the time, regardless of other conditions, was this AB plus spectrum, which was, credit where credit's due, came from the Blue Plus Aqua Blue T5 mix that was kind of the accepted T5 mix at the time. So we said, okay, here it is as a preset. That way, if you're unsure about your lighting, it's easy to find the general PAR guidelines for your type of coral. Use that PAR level, use the spectrum, and odds are you'll be more okay with that than anything that you're going to try to come up with on your own.
I believe
and
it's
then
100, 100, 100, 24, 24, 24, or something along those lines. So yes.
And the thing of
Patrick, Reef Wholesale, and Trina.
Now having so that's it. And then a lot of there's a number of coral facilities which use this immediately because they're like, okay, we like what they're doing. We want to switch to LEDs. We want to get good results. But then, of course, them being also commercial facilities with a huge amount of coral experience, they all start to tweak it, right? So then immediately you end up with a situation where, yeah, AB plus was the foundation, but some have a little bit more of this, a little bit more of that, less of this, more of that, And so realistically, it goes back to the same thing, is that having that flexibility is really good. Now, come to the G5. One of the criticisms that we got about the G4 was from the people who really, really loved the AB plus spectrum. Because to them, they wanted to run as much AB plus spectrum as they possibly could into their aquariums because they love it that much and it really works. And there is some validity to that, which is that even though the G4 Pro was still using most of its power on the AB plus, you were turning down those other channels, the red, the green, one of the warm white channel, etc. And you were giving up some of the potential of the fixture by not utilizing that power. So that vocal group of people who are like, I want more. I don't want to get another fixture. I want to just have my fixture deliver that, was where the blue came from. And so, from an ease of use standpoint, there's a lot of value there too. And that if you don't know anything about lighting, you don't even have to worry about that one, because basically it's running a spectrum which is perfectly tuned at all channels on all LED selection that's in there to deliver a spectrum that's going to work. So all of that, going back to the original thing, and I know I'm terrible because I go down these tangents, are very long-winded.
Really? I never noticed. So sometimes you don't do that. No, I won't hold it against you.
Okay. Well, you can edit this down afterwards. So just cut out all the middle part. And the bottom solution, the end of it is that in terms of lighting, that's basically it, is that we're at a crossroads. The point of Mobius is that we are going to actually add in some, or there is intention to add in some stuff that is very advanced from a lighting perspective in terms of using the lighting schedule to get coral to spawn, which is something that's already done. but building that potentially into Mobius directly for commercial facilities and aquaculture facilities that want to do that. And then on the other hand is to continue down this road of trying to just distill the best practices down into things which are just toggle switches for people who just want to enjoy their tank and don't want to worry about lighting.
That's super exciting to me, being able to have the coral spawn. You come across once in a while where a certain hobbyist has it happen. But then I was reading recently a book by James Nestor called Deep, which is about the free divers and everything that's going on in the ocean. And one of the things he was talking about was how the corals basically will spawn sometimes 100 miles away from each other. Just there's something that triggers it. And how do they know? So to be able to produce that in the home aquarium, and then maybe later on take it to the next level, which is the husbandry on the commercial level. I mean, this is the holy grail. So whatever can be done on that front, I think this is very exciting. So I'm also setting up another tank, in the process of setting another tank right now. And this is where I'm going to try out the XR15 blues. So can't wait to check it out and then provide my own opinion on this. So obviously take it with a grain of salt. But so far, my biggest issue has always been like I really like the Hydras as well, and just the lighting that they produce. I've have been running them on my main tanks for the past probably 5-6 years now, and so far to me it's still one of the best lights I've ever used. So I can't wait to just compare it to what the new generation of Radiance has in store. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, and that's one of the things, the technology will continue to improve. And I think at this point too, obviously with our fixtures, we aim to deliver a lot of value for the money. And that's not just the fixture, it's, the performance, all the other features that come with it, the customer service and support. Those are all, very important, as is our interest in the commercial side and the conservation side associated with coral propagation. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, that's one of the great things is that the technology has come a long way, and that there are, a lot of, I mean, most LED fixtures I would think that you can purchase at this point ought to grow coral. And that's just, that's one of the wonderful things about technology evolving, is that it makes it more accessible at all levels. So yeah, definitely.
So let me ask you this. Let's say there is Radeon 8 or 12, as the iPhones nowadays have the nomenclature, or whatever the number is. What do you think, or Radeon X? Let it be known that it's on this show that Radeon X trade name has been dropped. So 5 years from now, whatever it is,
we'll be paying you royalties. Yeah.
So I'll try to get some. So no, but so not your next generation, not the next one after, but where do you think EcoTech is going to be in terms of offering lighting? What kind of challenges you would want to address by that point? So far into the future, 5 years from now, 10 years from 7 years from now.
Well, I mean, I can't, what's actually kind of interesting is that we have a plan, we have this plan, and our general plan is to develop this system of intelligent equipment that talks to each other and yes, gives you this equipment ecosystem that works in a kind of seamless fashion as best that we can. And the technology, we started this out before the technology wasn't even remotely available, actually, in terms particularly the communications technology.
Gotcha.
And one of the things as we've come forward is that, especially with the advent of Bluetooth in particular, now there's this combination of, you have your proprietary, which is what's in our current products, proprietary RF communication that works best for some things, Wi-Fi, which will allow you to connect obviously from off-site, which incidentally we're about to start the beta testing to put that into Mobius. It's in there now, but basically to get it operational for users to be able to use the Mobius app off-site. And then there's Bluetooth, which is most effective for connecting to things up close without having to go through a lot of security protocol like you do with Wi-Fi. So with all of that together, we're at the stage from a communications platform where we can actually kind of move forward with the end game or the final vision. And the downside to it is that in the process, we basically had to redo the entire back end of our communications platform. And because one of our major commitments as a brand, which I think is also something that really differentiates EcoTech from pretty much every other brand out there, is the backwards compatibility. But from a backwards compatibility standpoint, that's why our rollouts take such a while, because when we do something new, we have to make sure everything previously works. Then we run into all of the real world issues. Not to go down a rabbit hole here, but it was like we just got one yesterday where somebody couldn't connect by Bluetooth, and it turned out for some ungodly reason that it was their DirecTV TiVo box in their home.
Interference, right?
Was interference, and that was obviously never a problem. That particular device and issue was never a problem with EcoSmart Live. But when we started with EcoSmart Live, you up in Canada may remember this, that certain internet providers wouldn't allow connections through EcoSmart Live initially.
Yes.
So whenever something you get out into the real world, just this permutations of use case are extreme.
And the customer doesn't care, right? I mean, like if I bought something, I just paid good money for this. It's not my problem when I cannot connect, and basically now you are the one fielding the calls. So.
And in fairness to the customer, they should, and they need, if you're not getting that level of satisfaction from a product, you should be reaching out to the company and you should be demanding, improved experience. And that's what where we're at right now. Is it's sort of, we're in full steam and rolling out the next set of feature and user benefits to Mobius, but we're also heavily vested right now in finding these outlier use cases. One of them, also another one, which unless you have over probably 70, 80 radions, this isn't going to affect you. But there's another update in the code that went out today actually to address certain issues for coral facilities. So it's always, this is one of our commitments, but going back to it, like long-term commitment is to basically make this system. And then from my perspective, a big part of the system is really to improve and simplify the coral keeping experience. So in terms of lighting, flow, everything else, it's great to be able to experiment. And if that's what you're really interested in, that's great. But as somebody purchasing equipment for an aquarium, you would want having all of the knowledge and ability at your hands to simplify that experience until you're comfortable and successful is where I think the future, from both the equipment side and the interface side is really, our goal as a company. That was a horrible story.
No. Jay, I think this is really, it really hits the point across in terms of what people need nowadays. And I'll tell you why, because as somebody who started Aquatic Log, over 8 years ago now, I deal a lot with, first of all, the experienced aquarists, so people that have been around, they've made mistakes, they've gone onto forums and whatnot. But I'm always amazed how many people just hop into the hobby this year or this month. They don't know a single thing about it. And we forget how much time we spend on the forums, on educating ourselves. And some people really enjoy doing it. Like there's tinkerers, there's people that really like playing around with equipment. But then there's certain people, they want more the end result, or they want somebody else to tell them, hey, just what is it that I should do? And we all know that, especially in this hobby, it's not as easy to get that answer, because what works for one person may not work for the other. And there's, as we've said before, with bacteria, with everything else, and nutrients, there's so many things where you can get a completely different result than somebody else, although you think you're following a certain template. So being able to focus on actually the result of being able to tell a person, at least don't worry about the lighting. You've got it covered. We'll take care of it. We'll err on the side of the caution, and having a structure around it, and products to support it. I think that I fully agree. I think this is the future, because at the end, I think people are a lot more interested in the end result is getting nice coral to grow, as opposed to spending extra time figuring out why doesn't it grow, and then going some esoteric way of buying witch hazel. Or
I
maybe
have it on good authority. And I bet it's going to work. I really do. I'm actually putting a lot of faith in this, honestly.
So in addition to Radion X, I recommend that maybe EcoTech now brands the witch hazel and bundles it with every product. So, and then I don't mind if Paleta gets the credit for this one. So,
yeah, and I think that's just it, though. It's exactly like you said. It's sort of, and I think the situation's better now, honestly, than it used to be. Because one of the things I've noticed is all the manufacturers. I mean, we've been on this tangent for a while. You kind of have to have the features to appeal to the high level hobbyist. The ability to do the controls, to tweak, to chase, color, or to chase growth, or to get some really complex piece of coral to survive, that's really hard to keep in the wild, let alone in an aquarium to live. You need to be able to tweak all of those equipment parameters.
like
But
a
the
race
reality,
car, right?
yeah, it's like a race car, and that's what you get from part of our brand. But the other part of our brand is largely, is focused on success for every hobbyist, and that's where everybody has to start somewhere, and it's overwhelming. Like you said, one of the great things about the internet is it shows us, what's possible in any hobby, especially reef keeping. You go on, you see all these beautiful reef tanks, and you get the impression, well, I like that. I really want that. I really want to be part of that. And you should have that opportunity. But like you said, the reality is most of those tanks that you're looking at also incorporate a huge amount of knowledge that's hard won. And anything that you can give to somebody so that they can get closer to that, or they can achieve that at least initially, and then learn slowly as they go, rather than keep banging their head against the wall in failure until eventually they give up, or they get lucky, or just fate smiles on them. I guess that's the same thing, but it's sort of like that's kind of one of the mantras we have as a brand, is we're trying to improve that experience for everybody. And I think that's where particularly Mobius comes in, and I think that's where you'll see more of the equipment development as well go on, is to just facilitate a lot of that the simplicity that could be. It's not necessarily the whole thing, but it could be inherent more in the hobby and the equipment.
That's very insightful. I couldn't agree with you more. This is at the end, we all want success. We all want our livestock to be healthy. We want a beautiful reef or a freshwater aquarium that we can just one day sit down on a Friday with a glass of wine or your favorite beverage and just enjoy the fruits of our labor. And the more we can kind of assist in both educating and also a little bit of hand holding if a person needs to, the better. And I think this race car analogy, to me, it makes a lot of sense. There is a niche, or there's lots of people that really enjoy fast cars. Some people enjoy the big monster trucks. Some people enjoy just a Honda Accord is going to be totally fine for them, and there's nothing wrong with that either. And going back like 8 or 10 years ago, right at the beginning of YouTube, there were only that many beautiful reef tanks, and everybody knew them by heart, and everybody knew the owners and so on and so forth, right? I mean, but now there's just so many, and I think we're at renaissance of especially reef keeping, and I can't wait to see what the next 5 years are going to be like in terms of the aquascape, color selection, and so on and so forth. So that's really exciting. So what I'm thinking, so this is the first video session. I have a list of probably another 20 different topics I wanted to talk about, but seeing that you have this tendency to go off on tangents, I'm gonna have to maybe move this to another session. But in all joking aside, so Jay, first of all, thank you very much for taking some time to chat about all of this. I think it's really exciting. It's a topic close to my heart. I also want to talk to mention that anybody who's watching this episode, please write in the comments below any questions to Jay or to me that you want to maybe cover in the next session. I hope there will be a next one soon, so we can maybe go into a little bit more detail there. Any questions you may have for EcoTech or aqua illumination. And with that said, Jay, anything from your end? Anything you wanted to add?
No, not at all. I mean, you're just seeing the fruits of our labor, and I'm realizing that it's very close to the time where I have to run up the street to pick up my kids from the bus stop. You know, in this COVID world, this is fallen upon my responsibility. My wife works for Sam Adams, so you know she's more essential. We got to keep the beer flowing to the world.
I hear you.
But you know, absolutely wonderful hanging out with you as always, Dimitri. I really appreciate it, and I love the your tanks are just looking absolutely phenomenal, and you certainly. Yeah, I mean, you've certainly achieved the dream, I think, in terms of reef keeping. So. Always a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
It only looks like this on the outside. I know every single issue with my tank, and I can have another list of 40 things that I'd like to improve. So with that said, Jay, thank you very much for your time. Have a good weekend, and we'll chat in a while. So cheers.
Sounds great. Bye-bye.
All right.